Every decision starts with a direction. Welcome to the Inner Compass podcast show. I am your host, Sindou Sanogo, and today we're talking about courage, taking meaningful risks, the kind of risks that stretch you, shape you, and move you closer to who you're meant to become. Let's begin. Courage versus comfort. Comfort feels safe. Courage feels uncertain. Comfort feels familiar. It keeps us where we are, even when it no longer fits who we're becoming. Courage, on the other hand, asks us to step into discomfort with intention, not recklessly, but purposefully. Comfort says, stay where you are. You survived this far. Courage says, there's more for you, but you'll have to risk something to reach it. And here's the truth. Comfort isn't bad. It protects us. It helps us recover. But when comfort becomes a permanent residence instead of a resting place, it quietly limits our growth. Courage isn't about chasing danger or making reckless choices. It's about recognizing the moments when staying comfortable costs more than stepping into the unknown, when silence costs more than speaking, when waiting costs more than trying. Every meaningful change in our lives, every breakthrough, every deeper connection, every step towards purpose requires discomfort first. So as we start this conversation today, I want you to sit with one question. In what part of your life has comfort become familiar while courage quietly waits? That's the tension we're going to explore. That question, comfort versus courage, looks different for all of us. But there are some people who've spent their lives training to move forward even when comfort isn't an option. People who understand that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's action in the presence of it. That's why today's conversation matters to me on a personal level. Joining me for this episode is someone I've looked up to not just as a soldier, but as a man, my brother, Sindou Sanogo. Sindou is a U.S. Army Green to Gold Cadet, and in his service, courage is tested daily, decisions carry real consequences, and comfort rarely exists. His experiences bring a perspective on risk, discipline, and responsibility that goes far beyond theory. Today, we're going to explore what courage really looks like in the military and in everyday life, and how taking meaningful risks can shape who we become. I'd like to welcome my brother, Sindou Sanogo, to the show. He's a husband, a father, a brother, and someone who's grown through life's experiences with strength and determination. He's resilient, thoughtful, and deeply values the people around him. He approaches life with authenticity and confidence, and he continues to inspire those who know him. Above all, he's simply a genuine, good man. Sindou, welcome to the show. How are you today?
I'm doing good. I appreciate that intro. I wasn't expecting all that, but yeah, I'm doing good today. Just another day. I'm glad to be alive. Glad to, be around family. And I'm just blessed. So
Hey, that's good to hear. Well, I'm sitting here right now drinking out of this red Tenerife cup. How was your
mhm.
experiences out in Spain? And what give us, one good and one experience that you would have rather not have, and would you recommend Tenerife to somebody else?
So I'll say one good experience that I had while in Tenerife was obviously just traveling with family. I mean, I feel like the biggest thing for me is just, having experiences with family. So that was one good thing. We were able to go on a trip with, myself, the child, the baby, um, or it's the unborn baby, mother-in-law, as well as, mommy. And, that was a good experience just to, have with family, that shared experience. Um, I'd also say another good thing was actually just like going out there and doing different touristy type of stuff, like seeing different tourist attractions and, really trying out different foods and things of that nature. I will say one thing that could have improved about the trip was just the food. I was expecting us to be on an island that had very good food and, had all this like tropical type food, and the weather was
Yeah,
great. Yeah,
yeah,
the weather was actually terrible. So I was expecting it to be great and sunny all the time, but you can't really control the weather. Food, that's I don't think you can really control that. So,
right.
but I'm still glad. We just wouldn't go back, but it was a good trip, good experience.
That's good. I mean, we spoke about it, and the food was one of the big sticking points for you. I mean, growing how we grew up, we used to eating some really good, really good food, filling food. And when you go to like other islands and other places, you're expecting to get some exotic, some filling, like some crazy. But yeah, that doesn't seem like you was too big on the food out there. Um,
Definitely not.
yeah. But before we get started, I want to run a thought by you.
Mhm.
Nipsey Hussle is an artist we both connect with, and his principles shaped how we view success and the work it takes to achieve it. In his song Top Down, he says, constant repetition is a path to progression. What does that
Yep.
mean to you today, especially with the challenges you face day to day? And would you say courage is an essential ingredient to success?
Yeah. So to me, yeah, courage is an ingredient to success. You gotta have that mentality, like every day, that dog mentality that you're gonna get it no matter what. And I mean, despite what people might put in your ear, the subtle remarks or comments, jokes, and stuff like that, you gotta be resilient in a way that you kind of put those comments and stuff to the side, and you still,
Yep,
push for your goals no matter what, who tells
yep,
you anything. So I would say, I would even add to that, being stubborn a little bit. I would say I'm stubborn in a way that I don't let anybody tell me as far as what I can achieve as far as my goals. If I have my mind set on something, I'm going to achieve it every day. And really, like, a lot of people don't realize that a lot of times it's very small successes that lead you to the overall big thing or big goal that you want at the end of the
sure.
day. So like the gym, right? Me and you are both people who, go to the gym actively, right? But like outside of the gym, when we're not at the gym, we're at home. I remember me during undergrad, I used to be doing push-ups in the living room, doing push-ups, squats before I take a shower. I used to wake up fresh off the wake up. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna do 100 push-ups, 100 squats. I had a daily goal every day. I'll do 300 push-ups, 300 squats, and in that, and constantly doing that, I eventually got to where I'm at today. So I'll just say those small successes, everyday successes, will get you to where you want to be later down the line, and really just doing it and just persevering despite any bumps in the roads, minor shortcomings, the subtle remarks, like I said, and just doing it with passion, faith in God, and you'll get there.
Yeah, that's official. I mean, I feel like that's how, Nipsey breaks it down in his music, how we both interpreted it really. And, I agree. I mean, like you said, we both go to the gym, pretty often. And, it's the small successes in the gym. It's the small successes when we're doing push-ups at the crib, or when you're reading a book, or when you're doing something that is going to help you get better just a little bit. That accumulated over time is what equals that progression. And you do
Hmm.
that enough, you do that repetitively enough, then that's where success comes out of it. So I
Yep.
agree with you 100%. But you mentioned dog mentality, and I mean, I know what dog mentality means to
Mhm.
me, but what does dog mentality means to you?
Dog mentality just is just pursuing what you want to pursue, but vigorously,
Mm,
despite what anyone might tell you, despite you might not wanting to go to the gym that day, or you feeling heartbroken because you're going through a breakup. You're still pushing through all the pain, and you're persevering just to get to that goal, or that that the top of the hill, whatever that is, or whatever that represents for you. So just constantly just grinding away, chipping away, despite any of the roadblocks or barriers or obstacles that might present in front of you. So just being a dog, and a lot. It's funny because a lot of times, like I work out when I go to the gym, like I run, and like I like to say like I hit my wall, and hitting my wall for me is just like there comes a point in time when I'm working out or doing something very vigorous, and it's like, dang, like I don't know if I could go any further. You know what I'm saying? Like I can't go. Like, I might not be able to go any further. Then it's like this feeling kicks in that that I can do it or I can achieve it. So I would say for me that's like my dog mentality. And next thing I know, like I'm on a treadmill, shaking my head, just like shaking all the pain off, and I can feel the weakness almost leaving my body because I'm just like in that moment, like that's when my dog mentality kicks in. It's like I'm gonna finish this run and get to the time that I want to get to, despite my mind telling me that I can't do it or my body trying to give out on me. So that's what dog mentality to me means.
Yeah, that's interesting because, like, I say that I asked that question because that's your perspective on what dog mentality means to you in your head. Like, in my own experience, I feel like in the past, my dog mentality really came from just being doubted. Like, in high school,
Hmm.
and not making this team, or having your friends doubt you and say little things that kind of chip away at your confidence. Like as an
Hmm.
adult now, being a little bit more mature, it's like my dog mentality used to be okay. I'm going to prove them wrong, but I'm really going to prove myself right. So like
Yep.
when I get to that red line and I'm running and I'm like damn, everything is getting hard. I'm like, nah, I can't lose. I can't afford to lose. You know what I
Yep.
mean? And I can't give them the satisfaction of knowing that they beat me. So I got to push past. And I feel like doing that for many years now, like the dog mentality is kind of like a habit now. Like when I'm in a groove of things, like I kind of get into this flow state of like, okay, everything is quiet. Now I'm just going. I'm going and nothing can stop me at this moment. So yeah, it's interesting, hearing like, another person's perspective on dog mentality. But I wanna take it back, to, your earlier years in life and, just growing up.
Mm.
So growing up, who was someone you saw as courageous? Obviously back in New York City, you were a lot around a lot of people, but who was someone you saw as a courageous person?
Just growing up in New York City, or just like as an adolescent in general?
Just adolescent in general. I mentioned New York because that's where we grew up, but
Okay.
just really in your adolescence.
Obviously, I'll say you. I'll say you. I definitely say that you kind of paved the way as far as like um, what I could achieve in life. Like I remember all of our conversations in high school, long conversations, long-winded conversations. I remember sometimes we would talk, and I'd just put the phone off to the side, and pick up the phone and be like, like, yeah, I understand you saying. But like I remember, the conversations I was like very I guess proactive in listening and stuff like that. Like I remember you used to, really drop a lot of gems and a lot of jewels in my ear, and tell me that, you kind of don't want to be your everyday person. You want to set some goals out and try your hardest to achieve them. And I'll definitely say you in that capacity. Um, and I remember freshman, sophomore year just struggling. I remember before high school actually, there was this kid, and I don't know, we were just having a conversation, and I remember the conversation basically ended where I was telling him like I'll never go to summer school ever, like that would never happen to me. You know what I'm saying? Because the stigma around summer school when you're in high school, or I guess prior to high school. And I
Yeah,
remember my freshman year, after my freshman year or sophomore year, I ended up going to summer school because I failed in like one or two classes.
yeah,
And and I remember later, I think in my sophomore year or junior year, I had to take like a developmental like math class, and that really like struck my confidence because it was like, dang, like I really put myself in this position. But you and a lot of other people who were around me that time kind of pushed me and reinforced this feeling that I could achieve anything that I set out, and in my efforts. So I kind of took that, and yeah, took the torch and just kept it pushing ever since. And I am where I am today. So you and some mentors in high school. One of my mentors at from the Boys and Girls Club, Dex, used to always let me hop in his office, apply for colleges, do homework, and really give me that time where I can invest in myself and invest in my future. So, I appreciate you, bro. So,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's always great, hearing it again from your perspective, because only I know what I was thinking when I was doing it. I
yeah,
told you this a couple of times, but when I was in college, freshman might have been my sophomore year. I mean, I don't know what happened, but I had an epiphany, and I just sat back and thought, I'm like, dang, like all I really got is my family. And, I haven't been, pouring in as much of my time and myself into my family. Like, I know that they are my family, my brothers and my sister and my mother and everybody, but I'm like, I haven't been investing myself to
mm,
try to get to know them as they are outside of my
yep,
brother and my sister. So, with you, it's like, okay, like you, my younger brother, um, I need to pour into you. So whatever successes or failures that I've made along the way, I could just tell you, and then
yep,
you could come out. I used to say three times better than I was. That's what I used to say. And
hmm,
so, for me, it's great to hear that it's something that there was some things that stuck with you and kind of help you pave your way, along with the mentors too, because it's really who you surround yourself that
yep,
determines your path. If you surround yourself around people who are negative and people who are doing things that's not something that you want to do, then you're going to end up doing it. But if you surround yourself around wise people, mature people, older people, they're gonna give you some gems that will help you catch
100%.
some
Yep.
situations, what I mean, so that you can know what to do in those moments. Um,
Hmm.
but would you say that, again, as an adolescent, would you say that you always felt like you was a courageous person, or did that develop over time?
Ooh, it's a great question. I mean, as an adolescent, so not like, yeah, looking back, like I do remember, like I always felt like I was smart. Like I always felt like I was smart, but I just never really applied myself when I was younger. I'd always it was more it was a lot more easier to influence me when I was younger and kind of put off what I truly felt just because at that age you're a lot more influenced about by the things that are around you, your environment, your parents, your friends. So I always felt like I was smart, but I always kind of put that to the side. And like I said, it wasn't really till I had those conversations with you and the mentors and stuff where I really started that voice in my head, that smart voice, the good angel on my shoulder. I started listening to that angel a little bit more and started just taking what that angel was saying and just carrying on and and pursuing whatever I wanted to pursue at that current point in time. Um, but as far as courageous, I mean, I would say, yeah, I believe when I was younger, I was courageous, but um, I guess there was also a little bit of fear in that, being how we grew up and the environment that we came from, it was a little bit of fear, but yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Kind of continuing on with that, you mentioned our upbringing. How did our upbringing influence how you handle pressure or fear today?
Hmm. Well, I mean, our upbringing was pretty tough. You know, we didn't have, the typical white picket fence, two-parent household upbringing that, a lot of other kids are fortunate with, these days, or I guess in the past. But I'll say our upgrade, upbringing, it made me resilient, like just resilient overall, a very resilient person. And this is professionally, and this is like outside of that. Now being, a father myself, I see where, you know, how we grew up and the holes, like the holes that or the gaps and the stuff that we weren't getting or the lessons we weren't getting, as a adolescent, kind of started to spew out, now being an adult and or being a father for that matter. And you know I think parenthood teaches you, it really makes you self-reflect on a lot of stuff and really sit down with yourself and see how you as a parent, you know, had a lot of gaps in, your adolescent and it has you self-reflect to where now you start to think about how can you fill those gaps? How can you create a better life for your child or your future children and your spouse if you are married or partner? How can you just be a better man and a better person or woman at the end of the day? So I would say it definitely made me resilient. Definitely made me. I think parenthood had definitely made me a lot more patient. I would say when we were younger, probably wasn't the most patient person. I was a
Shit, I
little.
know that.
But I would say like now, just a little bit more patient and well, not a little bit, but a lot more patient. And when I do talk to our child about stuff and things that he could have done better, it's a lot more of a conversation rather than him getting his butt beaten. But yeah, I'll say though those are the things I think our adolescent kind of helped me with as far as being an adult and things of that nature.
Yeah, resilient is a very good word to use because I would agree that because we grew up obviously around each other in the same home and all that stuff, but how we both look at the world is two different perspectives. So we could
Yeah.
have had the same experiences, dealing with the same trauma and stuff at home, but how we interpret that in the world is differently. But I would agree that resilience is something that I pulled away from our experiences back in New York and whatnot, and
Mhm.
how I define resilience is really like it's just really just like biting down. Like when things get tough, when it's stormy, when there's a tornado outside, like I just know I can bite down and just find this quiet place within me to just weather the storm. So in a ways now it could be looked at as a superpower, but back then it was a way to kind of cope with the traumas and stuff that we were dealing with.
Yep.
So I agree. Yeah. So fast forward to like your early adulthood and college years. um did you ever face any moments of doubt about your path or your progression, and then if you did, how did you push through it?
Ooh, yeah. This is a story I tell a lot of people, man. Man, I feel like I'm about to cry or something. But yeah, I just remember, man, like the conversations we used to have in high school and stuff like that. And I remember during that time, one of my goals was to go to WSU. Like that was my goal. I remember in art class, I used to paint stuff about WSU. I remember I told everybody, hey, I'm going to WSU. Like, this is the school, or Washington State University, WSU. Like, this is the school I'm going to. I'm going to graduate from here, and I'm going to get it regardless of whatever barriers, present themselves in front of me. So I remember during our college fair day in high school, I remember everybody was applying to these big name schools: University of Washington, Washington State University, Oregon State, all these big name schools and stuff like that. And I remember my senior year, my cumulative GPA was about a 2.42 or 2.3 something. And I still tried. I still tried to apply to those schools. I remember I applied to Washington State University. I applied to Central Washington University, and I believe a couple of schools in addition to that. And I remember once we got our the return letter back, in the mail, um, I didn't get accepted into WSU. I didn't get accepted to Central Washington University. All those big name schools, I didn't get accepted into neither one of them. And I remember the feeling of just disappointment. I remember I went to our backyard in the duplex that we were living in. I remember I got a bucket of water. I got a lighter. Then I burned the letter, the denial letter, and I remember just putting it in the bucket with just such disappointment and such and just such disappointment within myself because I didn't get accepted into WSU at that point in time. But I did remember at that point in time it just changed something in me. Instead of just dwelling on that disappointment and that discouragement within myself, all those conversations we used to have just kicked in, and that reinforcement just kicked in at that current point in time. And I remember just my 17-year-old self at that time was just like, yo, this is a minor setback. Like, I can do a year at a community college, which I ended up doing. I can do a year at a community college and still go to WSU. Right now is not my time. God is telling me this is not my time. But if I sit down, I buckle down, and I keep pushing and carrying this torch, like I like to say, I will get to my goal at that point in time, which was, getting enrollment into Washington State University. So I remember, I started off at, at every community college, freshman in college. My major was welding and fabrication initially because I was in this aerospace program. I ended up switching gears and focusing my academics towards criminal justice. Then I remember, man, my first year at Everett Community College, like my GPA ended up being like a 3.8 something or 3.6 something, and it was, and I think I made the like the dean's list or the honors list like all quarters that I was there, and I ended up getting accepted into WSU or receiving acceptance in 2018, if I'm not mistaken. And yeah, I just buckled down, man. Just buckled down, despite that, that shortcoming at that point in time, and not getting accepted, and just kept pushing for that goal. And I eventually got to that goal. And it's kind of interesting because even when I got to WSU, I continued the same thing, just carrying that torch. It was the same thing, the same mentality. The same mentality is started to transcend into different aspects of my life. And that same mentality I applied to the gym, hitting that last set or, getting that last 5 minutes of the run. It transcends to my academics. Just, despite all these professors throwing all these different assignments at me, I just buckled down, created a schedule, managed my time wisely and got these assignments done and, all that. So I would definitely say that was an example in my life where I had to be really resilient and achieving what I wanted to achieve at that current point in time.
Yeah, that's a really good story. I mean, my story wasn't the same. I mean, but I definitely, just like you, wanted to be, admitted or just accepted into WSU. Like that was like my Charlie in the Chocolate Factory. I got the golden ticket. Like when I got that in the mail, boy,
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to do backflips and everything. I was like, yeah, I did it. I got accepted to 8 other colleges, but the one
Mm-hmm.
WSU, I'm like, yeah, bro, I'm in it now. You know what I mean? But um, I feel like, for you mentioned going out to the back and bringing a bucket of water and burning up that letter. It's like, all that time, like it's just crazy how everything works out. Like I made that decision in me to pour into my family more and pour in all of these words and these lessons and these things to you specifically. And at that moment, that setback for you is when everything clicked. And then once it clicked, the words clicked, it's like, okay, now I got to be actionable because I really want to achieve this thing. You
Yeah.
go out to Everett Community College, you get that 3.8 some GPA, and then you make it into WSU, and then now you're like, okay, I've done this. I see that this template is successful, so now I can apply it to other things, and so
Yeah.
naturally you did, and then now you are where you are today. That's beautiful to hear, honestly.
Yep.
Yeah. How did you balance expectations, pressure, and figuring out the man that you were becoming?
Balance expectations, challenges, and the man that I am today.
Yeah, like in your early college years or your adulthood, like, how did you balance the expectations of the expectations, pressures, and then figuring out like the man that you want to become?
And it's so that that angel on my shoulder. I started listening to that angel a little bit more. I remember my freshman year, and I like. I'm gonna just be honest, man. I just always felt like I had a chip on my shoulder. Like I didn't. Going back to what Nipsey Hussle, a lot of his in a lot of his songs, he talks about not doing things the traditional way. You know what I'm saying? Signing with a major label or signing with a major label, then going through these shortcomings and challenges with the major label, then having to be independent and going the independent route. So I feel like in a lot of ways, my life, me, Sindou, like my life was like that. Just, I always felt like I had a chip on my shoulder. I didn't really, I kind of, ran into a lot of challenges, when I was younger and, doing, very odd stuff, during that point in time. And I remember freshman year of college, I just carried that torch with me and all those lessons with me and all the people who surrounded me at that point in time and, believed in me. I used to kind of lean on that as far as, any challenges that presented in front of me and just kind of kept it pushing. And just like really listening to the angel on my shoulder. A lot of my peers, I've seen a lot of people get peered out and drop out of college. My freshman year and sophomore year of college at WSU, and I just remember a lot of people just dropping out, doing from like partying and doing all these typical college kid stuff. And I just remember I wasn't really involved in that, man. Like my mind was just set on a goal. Like I knew how hard it took me just to get to where I was at. And for me, I felt like, you know, indulging in those activities would just significantly, hinder me from graduating, which was like the new goal, and just delaying that goal. So when I went into college or got to WSU, I just buckled down on my academics and really just pushed forward and kept pushing until I got to where I was at, where I graduated with my degree. Um, and I would just say I try to be very proactive in college. Joined a lot of different clubs, the BSUs, um, other other clubs that the university offered. I remember I was in the Criminal Justice Honor Society Club as well. You know, I learned a lot. I feel like in high school I didn't really, involve myself in a lot of clubs and things of that nature. But once I got to college, it was like, okay, this is like a fresh start for me. Let me start with, let me start doing things that I never thought I'd do, which was joining the clubs, buckling down on my academics, getting into the gym more, socializing more, but not getting involved in, all the stuff, typical college kids involve themselves into. So I don't know. I just felt like I had a chip on my shoulder at that point in time. I was just hungry, and I just needed to get it. That dog mentality, just getting it and not being distracted by any of the distractions that typically affect college students.
That's at that age, especially having that mentality, that puts you. That's a wise man's thinking, just to be able to understand what's happening all around him, things that could pull him out of his goals and his path, and just being able to buckle down and be resilient towards the goals that you want. That's very wise to have that mentality, at a young age. So yeah, that's really good to hear. But fast forward to your army experience, where I'm sure you have a bigger perspective on courage. How
Hmm.
did joining the army change your definition of courage?
I would say joining the army changed my definition of courage. Was I think like now it's like I'm not just I'm not just living for myself. I'm living for the family that surrounds me. I'm living for this country. When push comes to shove, I got to be ready to grab my M4, and go out there and do what I need to do. So I would say I'm living for more than myself. I'm living for the people around me. My country. Um, Proudly serving this country, and and just really just like pursuing what I want to pursue, um, as far as goals and stuff like that. Like the mentality hasn't switched whatsoever from when I was an adolescent, trying to get into WSU to, 18-year-old Sindou, who's now at Washington State University or WSU, to now, 26-year-old Sindou who, has a family, wife, children, and who's trying to get to these these goals and these milestones. So um, yeah,
And then how has the army shaped your discipline, mindset, and decision making?
I would say the army reinforced what I believe, or what I thought when I was an adolescent, and like the army just made that voice a lot louder. I'm super grateful for the army, man. I I would tell a lot of people that the army does have its challenges, and and there's a lot of stuff that will get thrown in front of you that you kind of just gotta adjust to on the fly. But the army has so many opportunities, man. Like I tell people that, man, if like the army saved me from my own self demising or self destructive ways, and just putting me in positions where I can achieve certain opportunities. Like, man, I never thought in a million years that I'd be in the army currently working on my master's degree, and getting paid handsomely to work on my master's degree. And I'm a student, and I never knew the army would take me to different countries. Like, because of the army, I was able to go to Japan. I was able to, drive through Canada. I was able to, afford a trip to Mexico with the family. I was able to also go to Tenerife just, 3 or 2 weeks ago. Like, the army's just created opportunities and put me in position to do all these different things. So I would say it shaped me in a way that it really further reinforced that voice that I used to block out when I was a adolescent. But then as I continued to develop, that voice became a lot louder, and now it's like I feel like I'm just like I'm almost like I'm at my peak now. Like, now I'm just like, man, like I'm going to set these goals out, and I'm going to achieve them vigorously, and whatever happens along the way, my mind is on that goal, man. Like, I'm gonna get it. I'm gonna get it, and I'm gonna keep pursuing it. I think a lot of times too is like, for me, it's also bigger than me. It's Nipsey also says, the biggest human act is to inspire. So within that, it's like, okay, I'm gonna get to that goal, but once I get there, it's like I'm gonna put my hand back and bring the next person up behind me, and make sure that they're achieving their goals too. So that's the biggest thing for me too. Is, yeah, I'm gonna get there, but I'm gonna also help people along the way. I'm not a gatekeeper whatsoever, and the people, for those who do gatekeep, God bless your heart, because at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, when we all pass away, it's really who did you impact? while you were alive? What influence did you leave around you? How did you change so and so's person's life? How did you change your family's life? You know, and just going back to Nipsey Hussle, I mean, we don't really need to speak about his reputation or his legend status. It says it for itself. What everything he accomplished, and then how he changed his community, how he changed the music business, more or less. So the Army put me in a lot of positions. The Army gave me a lot of opportunities. So I'm super grateful for the Army. And, I always tell people this is only the start. This is the start of my story. This is only the beginning. This is only the warm up. I'm just starting. I still got a lot more to achieve.
You ain't even making albums yet. You just making mixtapes right now. Nah, I mean, that's that you said it so beautifully, man. I mean, when you reach success, whatever anybody defines as their version of success, once you achieve it, it's like you want to achieve more, but you also want the people around you to achieve it as well. Like, as you were telling your story, I was imagining, I'm like, somebody who's hiking. Like, think about a group of people who's hiking. One person is the fastest and he ends up making it to the top of the hill. And he's celebrating for making it at the top of the hill, but also he's also sad because he's celebrating that alone while everybody else is trying to make it up the hill. So really the biggest accomplishment you have really is to raise people with you, and that will be the people who will tell your story when you're not here anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I agree with you. That's beautifully said. And so one final question on the military. How does the military teach people to recover and adapt after making mistakes?
Well, I believe the military, it teaches people from the get-go, man. When you're at basic training, man, like the very first thing you do after signing your contract, going to MEPS, you go to basic training, and there's a lot of obstacles thrown at you, man. You do a lot of things under pressure with drill sergeants, screaming in your face, or making these comments to kind of throw you off your A game. But in hindsight, they're trying to get you to push through the screaming, push through the lack of sleep that you get. There was a lot of lack of sleep that I got, during basic training, man. But they're teaching you in hindsight, man, like you can push through this, you can persevere through this. Thousands, millions of people have done it before you, but you can do it. And I'm gonna be here right by your side at the end of the day to help you get through this goal. So very early on in your career, man, they're teaching you that you must uh, push through adversity, whether that's the lack of sleep, whether that's, all these obstacles being thrown in your way, or whether that's, even more personal challenges, because there's soldiers in basic training like myself who go through personal challenges. I remember at basic training, I found out, we were having a child. And for me, that was like, dang, like that was a personal challenge because I wasn't there with my spouse. Like I was here training to create a better life for my spouse and our future family. So, I just felt like whatever the drill sergeants threw in my way, it was like, okay, you're doing this. It's a game in a way, but I have these things going on outside of the military. I have a child on the way. So whatever they're throwing in my way, I'm going to get through this goal or get through this adversity or this challenge just to get to my goal, which is, graduating basic training, eventually, relinking with my family and, get into that end goal at the end of the day. So, yeah, those are I guess the things that the military has taught me is just working through adversity, working through these minor and major challenges, and just honestly, just keep on trucking or keep on pushing. Yeah.
So, and then, I mean, kind of going along those lines, you mentioned, going through, these challenges, specifically, for, your family and your wife and your child, kind of shifting the focus to you. as a man, a father, and a husband, how has becoming a husband and a father deepened your understanding of courage?
Ooh, that's a great question. Yeah, so becoming a man, father, and a husband. I mean, man, I live for my family, man. I live and die for my family. I do everything for my family, and no matter what, man, it's just like now I have something to live for, but at the end of the day, I know what I'm willing to die for. You know, I think it's crazy because a lot of times when you don't have, or at least, when I didn't have, a child or a wife, I was a little bit more reckless in my behavior and really didn't think of the big picture. Like, yes, I was achieving all these personal goals and all these things, but it was also just like, well, like it's whatever. Like it doesn't matter like how I do certain stuff. But now it's like now, becoming a father, becoming a man, becoming a husband, it's like I have to make sure I pave the way for our child or, our son and our future children. I have to make sure that I'm doing all these things as a father to make sure that, our son and future children are not struggling, how we struggled, when we were kind of growing up, despite, mommy obviously doing the best that she could and, with the help that she had. Um, so I would definitely say that, there's a lot of courage that's kind of being reinforced just from being a father and a husband. And I would just say, man, just trying to just set the best example that I can for for our child, and not really trying to show like the I guess the more weaker side or trying to show like any shortcomings. Just really just trying to push that off to the side and making sure that my kid is seeing the best of me and every day, day in and day out. you know, and it's a challenge every day, man. Like I feel like as a father, bro, you learn something new about yourself and you learn something new about your child every day. And so I'll say those are the things that fatherhood has teach me, and I guess fatherhood has taught me about just courage, is just being active, being present every day, and learning from your mistakes every day. Because you're not going to be perfect. I know I'm going off on a tangent, but you're not going to be perfect every day. You're gonna screw up. You're gonna mess up. But how can you push forward through that adversity, that minor or major adversity, and still try to set a good example for those around you, let alone like your child, your son, So
No, that's again beautifully said. I mean, I'm not a parent myself, nor am I a husband yet. But I can only imagine, just what I would feel, if I was in those situations. And you mentioning that, you're a little bit more reckless when you don't have those things, compared to when you do have a family and a kid. It's like, okay, you just want to make sure you good so you can be able to take care of them. I haven't experienced that, but I can only imagine that's how I would feel too. But yeah, one common theme, I'm noticing in each one of your answers is resilient. Every answer has some way, shape, or form you had to bite down, you had to weather the storm, you had to be resilient. And knowing you for all your life, I know what I know, but I also learned a whole lot of new things about your story today. So I mean, I really appreciate you taking the time to share that. And as we get to the closing questions, I have two for you.
mm,
First, what does courage mean to you today compared to 5 to 10 years ago?
mm, man. So courage for me today, what it means is just, man, I think it's so cliche if I say like resilient, but it's just being like, I would say it's being a go-getter, but also just being present and like this. I mean, this is going to be like a not convoluted, but very comprehensive, I guess, answer. But just being present, being resilient or go-getter, and just yeah, just constantly just pushing for that goal, man, and really trying to set a good example, and passing that hand back, and bringing the next person up. Courage is a lot, and just like one word, but for me, but I would just say like, and every day, like I try to live my life how I want to see it, and and how I want my son to see it, or our child to see it, and just really setting that example and that tone for him, and making sure that he and our future children are seeing what an ideal father or an ideal role model or superhero should look like every day. So I would say that's what courage means to me as far as now. I mean, 5 years ago, obviously that answer would have been a lot different, but I'll say that's what courage as of right now looks like to me, is just being like a role model, a go-getter, and just also sprinkle a little bit of stubborn in there, at least for me, and just like achieving whatever you want to achieve, and setting the tone for those around you and your loved ones, or even I guess for me, like as far as the army, your soldiers, because in the army, as a leader, you have soldiers underneath your belt that you are responsible for, and really kind of setting the tone for them as far as what leadership looks like. So that's what courage means to me today.
Yeah, it's like be the change you want to see in the world. The man that you imagine is like the most supportive, the most loving, the most go-getter, the most professional. Whoever that man is, become him. Like literally assume who that man is, and make your everyday actions reflect who that man is. So yeah, that's you have your journey through 26 years, is full of depth, and the way you looked at courage as a kid, and kind of being having that angel be on your shoulder but not being actionable, to going through your early adult years and college years, and having to be more actionable because you set these goals, you set this expectation for yourself that you really want to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
All of that leads up to how you look at courage today. And I'm looking forward to how you look at courage in the next 5 to 10 years from now, or 20 years from now. Maybe it might be the same, maybe it might be a little bit more refined, maybe you might be a little bit more calm because your life is more settled. But it's just so interesting where life takes us. But to
Yeah.
kind of cap it, sorry, were you gonna say something?
No, I was gonna say, man, even in addition to that, man, just also with courage is also like just like, not like, if you fail, like, don't be afraid to lean on the people that's around you. Like, when I fail or there's a shortcoming or gap, like, obviously I lean on you, I lean on the wife, I lean on the people around me. So just also that there's strength in that as well, man, because life is convoluted and complex within itself, and there's so many things that's going to be thrown at you. And yeah, you can be this macho dude who thinks in their head that you can just persevere through everything, but there's going to come a point in time where you're going to fold, you're going to not do things correct, you're going to screw up. But then it's like, okay, who can I lean on to help me get back on my feet and keep on trucking, or keep on pushing, and till I get to that goal. So just also understanding that you're going to fail, and there's going to be challenges, and you probably are going to have to lean on people to get back on your feet, to keep on pushing. So I would say there's courage within that as well.
Yeah, I
Sorry,
agree.
sorry,
No,
sorry that I interrupt as well. Sorry.
no, you're all good. Like I agree, and honestly, tangents are we all good to have tangents on this show. But I agree with you. Like, as you were talking, I'm thinking like you can either be fueled, allow love, or let's say hate, negativity to fuel you. Like, going back to the gym and how I used to be. I used to use the negativity that I didn't achieve this in high school as my fuel to get me over the hump. So that was it was kind of like negative, but it felt like a superpower. You know, I felt juiced up. You know, but also I did feel like growing up, you know, when I did fail or when I did need to be vulnerable, um, you know, we like leaning on our support, our loved ones wasn't as open as it used to, as we would want it to be today. But there is love in that, and I did realize that in my older years that leaning on to your loved ones, your wife, your family, your brothers, your sisters, your community. That's also another form of strength, and that's the love part. That's not hate. That's love that you're leaning on, and it might be even better than the hate. But that's beautifully said. So to end with this question, um, what's one piece of advice you'd give listeners about making meaningful, about taking meaningful risks in their own lives? So what's one piece of advice you would give to listeners about taking meaningful risks in their lives?
Hmm. Yeah, I'm trying to think of a quote. Trying to think of a quote. But I would say this, man. A quote that I live by, man, is like the quote that I brought up initially by Nipsey, man. The greatest human act is to inspire, man. And like every day, man, just consistently grinding and taking that risk to get to where you want. And just know that, man, you gonna fail along the way, man. You gonna fail. You might not perform well at these specific milestones and I guess assessments to get to where you're at or get to where you want to be. But it takes courage within that just to put yourself out there to try to get to that goal, man. And I see it every day, being in the Army. You have soldiers that want to get to this goal, that want to get to this school, that want to get this tab, that want to get, this thing. And they have a lot of fear, fear of failure, fear of not being accepted, fear of being doubted, all this fear built within them that makes them not want to do that or, want to go after that. And they don't realize at that current point in time that it takes courage to even apply and put yourself in that position to get that goal or to eventually, hopefully achieve that goal. So I'll say, man, and like going back to the greatest act is to inspire is just like, man, like even if you fail, there's a lesson within that. And that lesson, you share your experiences with other people and let them know truthfully, like, hey, I tried to go for this goal. It didn't work out for me, but this is what I learned along the way when trying to get to that goal. And I love you enough to tell you this, but these may be challenges that may present itself while you try to get to that goal. But, I'm going to try to equip you with everything that I learned along the way so you can succeed and hopefully achieve what I couldn't achieve. And even within that, man, the people who do who push and make it to that goal, again, is just passing that hand back and making sure you uplifting the next person to get to the same goal, man. Just letting them know, hey, this is what happened. This is what I learned along the way. And I'm going to try to help you get to where I got to. And, and like they say, man, iron sharpens iron, bro. Like you got to uplift the next person and help them get to their goal. And that there's love and there's things that are reinforced that's going to, constantly keep you going and keep them going. So I would just say, man, the greatest human act is to inspire, bro. And whether you fail or you succeed in whatever you end up achieving, just make sure you pass that information to the next person, that's trying to get to where you're trying to be at, whether that's your little brother, a sibling, whether that's, your child, whether that's just like somebody who looks up to you, whoever it may be. Just make sure you let them know along the way that, they can achieve this goal and you're going to help them at the end of the day.
That's And that's a beautiful analogy, and I think that's the perfect closing to this episode. Sindou, thank you for being here today. I appreciate you not only as my brother, but also for the wisdom and experiences you shared with us today. Your perspective on courage and taking meaningful risks is something I know will resonate with a lot of people listening. Wishing you continued growth and success on your journey. Keep pushing forward, keep leading by example, and keep running your marathon. Thank you for joining the show.
Likewise, bro.
Calculated risks. When we talk about courage, it's easy to confuse it with recklessness, but meaningful courage isn't impulsive, it's calculated. A calculated risk isn't about jumping without thinking. It's about understanding what's at stake, preparing as best as you can, and choosing to move anyway. Courage isn't the absence of planning. It's trusting the plan enough to act when certainty still doesn't exist. Calculated risk starts with asking the right questions. What am I trying to accomplish? What's the real cost of staying where I'm at? What's within my control to prepare for this step? In life, we don't always get perfect information, but we do get perspective, and perspective helps us separate fear from fact. Recklessness ignores consequences. Calculated risk respects them and moves forward intentionally. Every meaningful risk you take in life, whether it's having a hard conversation, choosing growth over comfort, or stepping into a new chapter, requires preparation, awareness, and accountability. I want you to take a moment and imagine this scenario. You've been offered an opportunity that scares you. Maybe it's to move to a new city, starting a business, having a difficult conversation, or stepping into a new role. It feels risky. Your comfort zone is calling, telling you to stay safe. But there's also that pull, that quiet sense that this is a chance to grow. As you sit with this image, remember, the choice between comfort and courage is happening all the time. Sometimes in big leaps, sometimes in small, quiet steps. Take that moment with you today. Notice it, reflect on it, and when the time comes, be ready to step forward. Do not be too timid and squeamish about your actions. All life is an experiment. The more experiments you make, the better. Ralph Waldo Emerson. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting despite of it. Today, Sindou showed us what that really means. Stepping forward when comfort wants you to hold back. Taking calculated risks that stretch you. And trusting yourself enough to move even when the outcome isn't certain. Every meaningful choice, whether it's a hard conversation, a new opportunity, or a step towards growth, requires us to face discomfort, weigh the risks, and lean into action. Courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, asking you to take the next step anyway. As you reflect on your own life, ask yourself, where has comfort kept you from growth? What's one step of courage you can take today, no matter how small? And in our next episode, we'll explore another practice that transforms the way we live. Curiosity as a compass. We'll talk about how asking better questions can guide us towards clarity, purpose, and a deeper understanding, and how curiosity can lead us to places we never imagined. So take what you learned today, step boldly, and join us next time as we follow curiosity to see where it leads. I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you.